welcome viewers. I'm Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump says that he has held a very successful meeting on Gaza at the United Nations General Assembly. Speaking to reporters as he left the UN headquarters, Trump has stated that he expects Israel to join the talks soon. French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that if US President Donald Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, he must stop the war in Gaza. Macron has said that only Trump has the influence to pressure Israel to end the conflict. US President Donald Trump has stated that he believes Ukraine can retake all land that has been occupied by Russia and has stated that Kiev should act now, pointing to Moscow's major economic issues. Super typhoon Ragasa has slammed Hong Kong with hurricane-force winds and torrential rain. The storm has shut down the city, cancelled more than 700 flights and triggered panic buying in supermarkets. Now, as per reports, in Taiwan, 14 people are dead and more than 100 are missing after flooding devastated a tourist town. US President Donald Trump will meet Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on the 20th of October in Washington. The White House has confirmed that the two leaders will discuss security issues, including the AUKUS submarine deal. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has stated that he is negotiating with the US to reduce tariffs levied by Donald Trump. Speaking in New York, Ramaphosa has stressed that the talks are underway and has added that the African Growth Opportunity Treaty needs to continue. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has stated that he has held constructive trade talks with Chinese Premier Li Qiang and that he expects the dialogue to deepen over time as both countries are seeking a way out of a tariff conflict. Italian film legend Claudia Cardinale has passed away at the age of 87. Known as a symbol of post-war European cinema, Cardinale enjoyed a long and celebrated career in film and theatre. Her roles in classics like The Leopard and Once Upon a Time in the West cemented her as one of the most iconic actresses of her era. We're tracking developments from New York at the UNGA. Chilean President Gabriel Boric has called for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to be tried by an international court over the ongoing conflict in Gaza. While addressing world leaders, he declared that those responsible for the war should face justice. Listen in.
Yo no quiero ver a Netanyahu destrozado por un misil junto a su familia. Quiero ver a Netanyahu y a los responsables del genocidio contra el pueblo palestino enfrentados a un tribunal de justicia internacional. Hoy, siendo 2025, son miles los seres humanos inocentes que pierden la vida solo por ser palestinos. Tal como hace 80 años, millones la perdían solo por ser judíos.
In other developments, Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba called on the Palestinian leadership to establish a more responsible system of governance. He also affirmed that Japan's recognition of Palestine as a state is no longer a question of if but when. Take a look.
For our country, the question is not whether to recognize a Palestinian state, but when. The continued unilateral actions by the government of Israel can never be accepted. I must state clearly that if further actions are taken that obstruct the realization of a two-state solution, Japan will be compelled to take new.
With us on the broadcast is Dr. Punisara Amarasinghe from the Kotalawala Defence University in Colombo in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. High-octane developments coming in from New York. Now we have Chile and Japan both stating that it is important to recognize Palestine and that it's important for the Palestinian leadership to establish a more responsible system of governance. But what's also interesting is the rhetoric that is coming out from the United States of America. We do remember Trump's nearly 1 hour speech at the UNGA yesterday, stating that recognition of Palestine is only going to embolden Hamas. This is something that Marco Rubio then echoed in the United Nations Security Council as well. In light of the US's statements, what do you make of other countries, including American allies, now recognizing Palestine?
Well, as you pointed out, you can clearly see American allies have clearly altered their focus from being more pro-Israeli to more pro-Palestinian, especially if you simply understand the statement made by Chilean President. It was a statement that reflects his anger, right? In the speech he made in Spanish simply says that I don't want to see dying Netanyahu from the missile. On the contrary, I want to see him behind the bars in Hague, in ICC, in International Criminal Court. So this simply unveils just the tip of the iceberg and how fundamentally the world opinion has been extremely detrimental, hostile towards Netanyahu's government in Israel. And also, the statement made by the outgoing Japanese Prime Minister is another example. But when you look at all these developments from a practical point of view, we simply need to understand to which extent it is possible to bring Benjamin Netanyahu before International Criminal Court, given the fact that ICC seriously lacks a practical jurisdiction over the Israeli leadership. Even last November, they were issuing warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu, making him a war criminal. But at the same time, Israeli government has clearly stated that they have highly efficient practical court system, so they are not duty bound to embrace the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court. And from the other side, the state of Israel has not either signed or ratified Rome Statute, which simply excludes Israel from ICC's jurisdiction. But having said that, I would like to look at the practical ground reality, as you pointed out, the rage coming from the American allies. The day before yesterday, UK recognized the Palestinian statehood, followed by France, Canada, and some other countries in the West. So which simply serves as a great, remarkably encouraging point for the Palestinian Authority, headed by Mohammed Abbas, to forge their leadership. As Japanese Prime Minister clearly pointed out, now Palestinian Authority, headed by 90 years old Mohammed Abbas, has to do something for the seriousness of this two-state solution. And if there is no seriousness, if there is no practical implication, the entire modus operandi of giving them the Palestinian statehood will be futile. Because we must also not forget the fact that Palestinian Authority they have zero authority in Gaza. Gaza has been fundamentally dominated by a terrorist group called Hamas since 2007. So which has been the practical reality. So this is kind of quite a critical and alarming situation that looms before the international community.
Absolutely, sir. I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking further updates. Now we're learning that pro-Palestinian activists shared images from the Gaza-bound global Sumud flotilla to show what they describe as explosions and drone attacks off the coast of Greece. Now, according to the flotilla's statement, multiple drones were seen hovering over their boats, while unidentified objects were dropped and explosions were heard from several vessels. Communications were reportedly jammed during the incident. As the flotilla neared Gaza, activists claimed to have been targeted again by drones. While the group did not confirm any casualties, they stated that they would not be intimidated by these actions. Still with us on the broadcast is Dr. Amar Singhe. We do know that despite the war going on the ground, the humanitarian situation is quite dire. The United Nations has come out and stated that the civilians in Gaza are suffering famine as well. In light of that, there is this global Sumud flotilla that is carrying humanitarian aid, food, urgent medical supplies as well, to ensure that the people of Gaza are provided this aid urgently that they require. Amidst all of that, these drones have been sighted, explosions have been heard. What do you make of this attempt to, in fact, derail the objective of the flotilla?
Frankly speaking, if the reports are true, I must simply state that this is a blatant violation of international humanitarian law. To be very honest, none of the employees from international organizations or the activists cannot be subjected to attack on ground under the Geneva Conventions. That stands as the ethical clearance from the legal perspective. But having looked at what was going on in the battlefront of Gaza for past few months, which is rather evident that the state of Israel has not simply looked at all these ground realities from legal point of view. And there were certain efforts that UN employees were killed on the ground, and some of the journalists were targeted by Israeli attacks. So this is another situation that simply unveils that the Israeli government, especially the military wing, they simply need to crush Gaza by hook or by crook, right? And there is no kind of a moral ground between the ground operation intensified by IDF and the norms of international law, which sounds as the pathetic reality before this conflict.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in. We're now learning that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. In this meeting, he has described it as good and constructive. Now, talking to reporters shortly after the meeting, Zelensky has in fact hailed the big shift in Trump's position after the US President stated that Ukraine should retake every inch of territory that he calls occupied by Russia. Now, the Ukrainian leader has added that Trump has the influence and power to be a game changer for Ukraine, noting the importance of strong support from the US and the global community. Listen in.
President of the United States was a good, constructive meeting. I'm very thankful for his efforts. I said it during the beginning of our meeting, but I think what is more important, what we discussed, I will not share all the details this time of our discussion, but it was good. And there are some moments about battlefield. I think that President is he knows some details, and I think he knows more details than usual. This post of Trump, it's a big. And when he appears abroad, in Beijing or somewhere else, it's only to buy more time for killing, pretending he seeks diplomacy. Putin only cares about using every meeting, every chance to keep the war going. I met with President Trump just now, and we spoke about how to finally bring peace, and we discussed a few good ideas, and I hope they will work. And I'm grateful for this meeting, and we expect America's actions to push Russia toward peace. Moscow fears America and always pays attention to it. United States. So our soldiers this month, they occupied 360 kilometers, and they encircled 1,000 soldiers. And of course we want to exchange, because we need our soldiers in any case. But thanks to our soldiers, we have this possibility, this opportunity, and we will continue until Russia will stop this war.
Zelensky further added that his discussion with the US President also covered the frontline situation, the counteroffensive operations near Dobropilya and Pokrovsk, and future security guarantees as well. Zelensky concluded that he expects America's actions to push Russia towards peace, emphasizing and claiming that Moscow fears America and always pays attention to it. Meanwhile, Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN responded to recent comments on the Ukraine war, stating that Moscow is not abandoning negotiations and continues to support serious talks with Kyiv. Take a look.
Мы не отказываемся ни от каких переговорных форматов, но выступаем исключительно за серьезный, субстантивный и незашоренный разговор. Не отказываемся мы и от переговоров с Украиной, несмотря на крайне сомнительную, мягко говоря, легитимность ее нынешних властей.
With us on the broadcast is Mr. Gilbert Dr. Rao, International Relations and Russian Affairs expert, joining us live from Brussels in Belgium. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Trump, during his nearly 1 hour long speech at the UNGA, had in fact highlighted the war that is taking place. He'd called on NATO allies to increase their spending and stated that Ukraine should take back land that has been occupied. This obviously has not gone down very well with the Russians, who have now stated that they have not abandoned any negotiations. So in Trump's eyes, he did point out yesterday that his efforts are not really yielding anything concrete in order to stop this particular war. Where do you see this war headed to next, and what is your perspective regarding the security guarantees that have been under discussion for more than a month now?
I'd like to emphasize that Mr. Trump is an expert at spreading confusion and speaking double talk. What he said yesterday was a case in point, both before the United Nations General Assembly and more particularly his remarks to journalists, which you have cited here, with how the Ukrainians can win back the lost territories, and also how Europeans should respond by shooting down Russian airplanes that commit incursions into their airspace. These were actually sarcasm. They should not be taken at face value. The meeting with Mr. Zelensky was also a decoy. It is to keep his enemies off balance, and he has succeeded very well. Today's BBC was reporting these issues as if they were a change in position in Mr. Trump. Yet again, how many times can he do a flip-flop to being for Russia, for Ukraine, for Russia, for Ukraine, without it being obvious that he is playing his opponents in Europe in particular and domestically for fools, which is not particularly hard because they are fools. Let's look at details. Did Mr. Trump say that the United States will now supply arms to Ukraine? No. Mr. Trump was saying, as he said for the last month or more, that this is a European task. And that he also knows as well as I do and you do and many of your audience know that Ukraine's army is on the ropes. The front line in Donetsk is collapsing. The notion that this can be turned around and that the Ukrainian army can recapture its territory is utter nonsense that only the desperate European leaders, and in particular Mr. Starmer's team in London, would like to have the public believe. But it cannot happen. Mr. Trump knows that, and he was playing them for fools.
All right, I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking further updates. At a high-level meeting of the United Nations Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned of the risk of the war escalating as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has pushed for stronger sanctions against Russia. Take a look.
But progress on a much-needed ceasefire and a lasting peaceful settlement remains painfully slow. Every day of continued fighting undermines the chances for diplomacy to succeed and increases the dangers of further escalation.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's international allies, including the European Union, has now come out and backed it once again. Their foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, has reiterated the EU's support for Kiev. Listen in.
We remain in unwavering support for Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine militarily, economically, politically and diplomatically. We support a just and lasting peace based on international law and UN Charter. Our support to Ukraine is about making peace a reality.
At the UNSC meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for stronger sanctions against Russia, emphasizing that Moscow must face consequences to be forced towards peace. He has described tougher measures as essential to prevent Russia from becoming a threat to European nations. Additionally, Zelensky has warned that China is playing a role in helping Russia sustain its war efforts in Ukraine and has urged Beijing to take more active steps to pressurize Moscow towards heading towards the path of peace. All right, viewers, on that note, we're shifting our focus to some other news coming in. Tensions between the United States and Iran has taken center stage at the UNGA as well. US President Donald Trump told world leaders that Iran, which he called the world's top sponsor of terror, should never be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. He also pointed to the strikes by US earlier this year, which crippled Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity. But just hours later, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has fired back in a televised address from Tehran, rejecting talks with Washington, calling it a dead end and insisting that Iran would not yield to any pressure from outside. He has defended the uranium enrichment at 60% while stressing that Iran does not seek nuclear weapons. The standoff comes as European powers have launched a 30-day process to restore UN sanctions, and with the IAEA now preparing to send inspectors if a snapback deal is reached. Listen in to what Iran's supreme leader had to say.
ما تسلیم نشدیم و نخواهیم شد. ما تسلیم فشار در این قضیه و در هر قضیه دیگری تسلیم فشار نشدیم و زیانهایی هم مترتب برش، یعنی سود که نداره هیچ. مطلب دوم این است که مذاکره با آمریکا در شرایط کنونی ضررهای بزرگی برای کشور داره که شاید بشود گفت بعضی از این ضررها جبران ناپذیر هستند. مذاکره با آمریکا در شرایط کنونی ضررهای بزرگی برای کشور داره که شاید بشود گفت بعضی از این ضررها جبران ناپذیر هستند. طرف تهدید کرده که اگر مذاکره نکنید چنین و چنان خواهد شد. حالا نمیدونم بمباران میکنیم چه میکنیم، از این حرفا، و یه خود مبهم یه خود صریح تهدید. یا مذاکره کنید، اگر مذاکره نکردید چنین چنان خواهد شد. این تهدیده. خب قبول چنین مذاکره‌ای نشانه تهدیدپذیری ایران اسلامی است. اگر چنانچه شما رفتید با این تهدید مذاکره کردید، معناش این است که ما در مقابل هر تهدیدی فوراً میترسیم، میلرزیم و به طرف تسلیم طرف مقابل میشیم. معناش اینه. این تهدیدپذیری اگر به وجود آمد دیگه انتها نخواهد داشت.
With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji, Senior Geopolitical and Strategic Defense Expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you, sir, for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. A very clear response from Iran's Supreme Leader to Trump. At the moment, he stated that what's taking place and the statements that have come out from New York yesterday, it's not negotiation, it's dictation. Where do you think this is headed next?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for getting me for your show. Very complex situation. The world has departed from 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, as per which Iran had been subjected to some kind of a self-restraint to go nuclear. Iran's stance is very clear. So much so that they have number of times clarified to the world that they have no intentions of making nuclear bomb. And their nuclear energy research and development is purely towards energy and power. These are the two things they have been focusing on. So despite that, 6 countries, if I recall and respect my memory, had lifted sanction way back in 2015. But lo and behold, 2018, Donald Trump comes back to power and he withdraws from JCPOA. So these kind of flip-flops do not take any agreement today in 21st century to nowhere. They leave the subject in a lurch, and the trust deficit goes up by leaps and bounds. Today, as it stands, as per the statement of the cleric leader of Iran, I personally feel that they have lost patience. They are frustrated with the response metrics of the global order, especially the superpower, and they would actually do what they deem it appropriate. But having studied Iran in detail, they know the consequences of going nuclear. When I say going nuclear, what I mean is going to produce nuclear bombs. They are fully aware of the consequences. And my take is that they may not go nuclear, but as long as they have more than 60% enrichment, as per my latest input, I have figures which indicates that the percentage of enrichment of uranium in possession with Iran today, although the report says that it is nowhere in Iran, it's in some kind of a distant place or country, it has already crossed 87.6%. Now, for Little Boy, which was dropped way back in 1945 on Hiroshima, the enrichment percentage was 86, at least 1.6 less than what Iran has. So if this is to be taken as true, well, they have the capability. They can make a bomb. And the issue here is, how do you prevent Iran from going nuclear is the moot question. If that be the moot question, I personally feel that the negotiation has to be done on flexible terms, not on flip-flop kind of mechanism which Donald Trump has been resorting to. So last but not the least, Pia, is that strategic patience is one thing, but strategic objective to be achieved in the global order when geopolitical churn is taking a big hammering today is actually forcing these kind of issues to a kind of a state of dilemma. I really therefore can't actually comment with objectivity as to which direction we are heading to. Back to you, Pia.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking more developments from New York. At the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has now stated that he's pleased with the ceasefire achieved following tensions last April between Pakistan and India, which escalated into a conflict. Now, this comes after India launched Operation Sindoor following the dastardly Pahalgam terror attack in which 26 innocent civilians were killed. Erdogan has stated that the issue of Kashmir should be resolved on the basis of UN resolutions for the best interest of the people of Kashmir, and he hopes dialogue will lead to a lasting solution. Listen in.
At all times, esteemed friends, in South Asia, we consider the preservation of peace and stability to be of utmost importance. We are pleased with the ceasefire achieved following the tensions last April between Pakistan and India, the tension which had escalated into a conflict. It is important to see a cooperation between the two countries when it comes to counterterrorism. The issue of Kashmir should be resolved on the basis of resolutions of the UN for the best for our brothers and sisters in Kashmir through dialogue, we hope.
Major General Sudhakarji is still with us on the broadcast. Interesting statement by Erdogan. He's known for doing this. Though last year he did not take up Kashmir at United Nations General Assembly. He omitted mentioning Kashmir in his speech. That obviously left Pakistan miffed. But we do see that this year, back when Operation Sindoor was taking place, Turkey had lent its drones to Pakistan, the Bayraktar drones that were shot down by our indigenous Akash-Tir air defense systems. Once again, Erdogan stating that this issue should be solved according to UN resolutions. Meanwhile, India maintains that it's a bilateral issue with Pakistan and has rejected any third-party mediation.
Absolutely, Pia. If that be a question to me, I would respond by saying in two following questions. First and foremost is, who's Erdogan? And what is the locus standi with regard to the Jammu and Kashmir between India and Pakistan? Thousands of miles, his own house, his own country is burning. Look at the inflation, look at the unemployment problem, look at the debt he's running into, and look at the crisis he has got with Greece. His neighbors are not happy with him. He has got serious problems in Mediterranean. It will do good to him if he focuses on his internal homeland security and stability rather than focusing so many miles away about Jammu and Kashmir. It's a bilateral issue. If he doesn't know, let me also give you a historical lesson to be taught to him forever. India doesn't expect any third-party mediation, and it will do good to Turkey if he refrains from making such kind of comments. And we understand that in the contestation of Ummah in the Islamic domain, he's trying to prove his worth so that he plays a leadership role in the South Asia subcontinent. Therefore, you find the ugly head of Turkey, is sticking out there in Bangladesh. You find the reference of Turkey there in Nepal, and occasionally we find the name in Jammu and Kashmir in the hinterland as well. So these barricades which have been destroyed during Operation Sindoor, it will do good to him and also to his country if he restricts himself to NATO and his own region rather than meddling in the issue which is supposed to be resolved bilaterally. And it has been accepted, not once, not twice, number of times. And going back to the UN resolution, maybe it will do good again to him by actually referring and studying the history in detail. Then only he will have a clarification as to why the UN resolution has lost its relevance with regard to India and Pakistan. And therefore, the 1972 Shimla Agreement, bilateral resolution of all issues between India and Pakistan, is the centrality of all mechanism to actually resolve India-Pakistan disputes in times ahead.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to news coming in from Hong Kong. We're now learning that massive waves triggered by super typhoon Ragasa has hammered the coastlines of Hong Kong as the world's most powerful tropical cyclone this year, lashed the city with hurricane-force winds and torrential rain. Hong Kong has issued the Typhoon Signal 10, its highest warning, which urges businesses and transport services to shut down. While the Taiwanese residents are reeling from the aftermath of the super typhoon Ragasa after the Hualien disaster, global warming is increasing as the frequency of tropical storms and typhoons in Asia is testament to this as well. Listen in to what a typhoon expert had to say.
Most of the typhoons, when they develop in the Western Pacific, then they move towards the west. And the typhoon can continue to develop if it doesn't get impeded by land or by other dry air and so on. So this time, Ragasa developed in the Western Pacific and then moved through the Luzon Strait over very warm waters and under favorable atmospheric conditions. And so therefore it gets unimpeded as it goes through the Luzon Strait and go right straight into the South China Sea. And because of that, it can continue to develop and therefore became the strongest typhoon this year to hit China. Because of global warming, you will have more moisture in the atmosphere, and water temperature is also high, and therefore you will expect to have once the storm develops, it has more energy. And so you can expect the storm to become even more intense in the future. So you should expect to have more super typhoons, not only to hit the South China coast, but maybe even other parts of Asia.
Ragasa is expected to be closest to Hong Kong on Wednesday morning, skirting just 100 kilometers south of the city. This is according to the Hong Kong Observatory, which issued the highest level of typhoon warning overnight, which is signal number 10. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.